George Gilmore was a Scots Presbyterian from Northern Ireland and was the last of the Protestants to live in what was known as the lost Protestant village of the East Mountain. It was not a village as such, but a loose series of small clusters of dwellings, usually in threes, spread out over the mountain, each with their own land for the keeping of livestock. The groupings were served by Balscarron Road to the north, Mollymons Lane centrally, and the Lead Mines Road to the south, constructed in 1754. Members of the riding club would have passed George Gilmore's house in their cross-country events and directly past the decayed gable of Harry Bootman's house, who died in Flanders in the First World War. Bootman's house fell into ruin, but George Gilmore, who was constantly seen on a small motorbike crossing Jerry's land in the early years of the club, his dwelling survived until quite recently. The group occupying this section of Jerry O'Brien's old lands have put a new roof on Gilmore's to form two stables. The third dwelling in this cluster, now in a very ruinous state, was owned by the Corr family. George was born in Howth and led the South County Dublin Brigade of the IRA from 1915 to 1926. He fought in the IRA in the Irish War of Independence and in the Irish Civil War on the anti-treaty side. After the defeat of the anti-treaty forces, he served as secretary of the late Taoiseach Sean Lamass. In Dublin in 1925, he organised the escape of 19 IRA prisoners from Mountjoy prison. He was arrested for IRA activities in 1926, released in 1927, arrested again in 1931 and released again in 1932. In the late 20s, as a member of the IRA Army Council, he negotiated with representatives of the Soviet government in an attempt to arrange military training for selected officers of the IRA. After the election of the first Fianna Fáil government under De Valera in March 1932, Gilmore was one of the representatives of the Army Council that liaised with De Valera. On the 14th of August 1932, he was shot and wounded by plainclothes members of the Garda Síochána in County Clare, an incident that was blamed on the police by the official Tribunal of Inquiry that reported 1 month later. He was one of the founders of the Republican Congress, a left-wing socialist Irish Republican group, in 1934. He was later active in 1936 to 39 as a supporter of the International Brigade in the Spanish Civil War. During the 1960s, when the Republican movement once again moved to the left, George once again was in demand as a speaker and as a writer in Republican publications. He died in Howth, aged 87. Members of the riding club would have seen George in his latter years walking across Jerry's land. June Heavey, after whom Heavey's Field was called, now known as Cannon Rock Field, would frequently bring soup down to George. He was a quiet, gaunt man, kept very much to himself and avoided Jerry O'Brien at all times. Howth Riding Club was hardly aware of his presence. He became a recluse in latter years, a most historic and intellectual figure living directly in the middle of our cross country and part of the club's heritage. May he rest in peace.